We go. Welcome to the monthly meeting of the Athens-Clarke County Community Advisory Committee, who is focused on currently on the Athens-Clarke County Clean and Renewable Energy Action Plan. I'm Mike Wharton with the Sustainability Office here in Athens, and we also have on the call Aaron Hall. He is our Energy Program and Conservation Coordinator out of the Sustainability Office as well. I do want to remind people that this is a live streamed meeting, so you can watch it on YouTube, and it's there at accgov.com/100. And without any further ado, I will turn it over to Robert with Southface.
Thank you, Mike. For those of you who I have not met, I'm Robert Reed. I am a independent advisor at Southface. Was with Southface for over 11 years, for a long time, but now am helping out with community engagement work and clean energy planning and other community planning work that Southface has. So I do want to check on one thing. Samantha McDonald with GreenLink was having problems hearing. Samantha, if you could put in the chat again, if you've corrected your ability to hear. She's up. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And then I will also ask Lacey Davis to introduce herself. And Maria is off on a vacation this week and will be returning next week. And so we will be updating her with all of the information and from this meeting and making sure that gets incorporated as we move forward. But I'll ask Lacey Davis to introduce herself as well.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lacey Davis. I'm a program coordinator for Southface Institute and their Sustainable Cities team. And I'll be taking notes today. So happy to be here.
Great. And I see Matt Cox with GreenLink, also part of the team. Matt, do you mind doing a quick introduction?
Hey, good afternoon. I'm Matt Cox. I'm the CEO and founder here at GreenLink Analytics. Good to see everybody again.
Thanks, Matt. And then Samantha McDonald.
I'm Sam McDonald. I'm a senior energy analyst at GreenLink Analytics and happy to be here again.
Thanks, Sam. So we'll do a little bit of our next steps here and sort of that was the kickoff team. Anybody else from GreenLink that I missed?
Yep,
So
you're good.
the next slide here, and we are. I am not in the. Let's see. Mode. Learning a little bit about WebEx here and sharing. Let me double check, make sure that I'm. If I hit the next button, what happens?
You're in presentation mode at this point.
But you're seeing the public meeting slide, but not the Clean and Renewable Action Plan slide.
That's correct. That's correct. We see the public meeting slide at this point.
Do this. Let me unshare for a moment and come back in with a different share and inside of PowerPoint.
So, Robert, while you do that, let me give you a chance to take a little pressure off. Michael, if you want to do a recap for the folks who joined after we live streamed about the Public Service Commission open house town hall meeting that's coming up.
Sure. So the Public Service Commission is hosting a town hall on, let me look at the PDF again. I think it's March 24th at 9:30 in their hearing room in Atlanta. We have put in the chat the press release for the town hall the PSC put out. The PSC is in the process of starting the 2022 integrated resource plan for Georgia Power, which is a 3-year cycle where Georgia Power reviews their energy mixes and efficiency policies for the next 20 years. And there's a long process with commenting, and I think that ACC, and Mike can tell you about that, is going to be involved as a community intervener with some other Georgia communities. So I think that most of what people will share with the PSC at the town hall is their thoughts about the integrated resource plan and what should be in there. And I think that there is going to be a lot of advocacy and activism around this year's IRP. And I have also included in the chat a contact for Carrie Ritzler, who works for the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy. If you can contact her to find out about activism and advocacy that's going on surrounding the IRP and this particular town hall.
All right, Robert, back to you.
Thank you much. My ability to share seems to have disappeared from my WebEx, but am I sharing the Clean and Renewable Energy Action Plan cover?
You are.
Okay, great. The Community Advisory Board meeting. So it is sharing. So we'll just keep going on this. And if I go off a line on the presentation, y'all let me know. So he is making sure my cursor is there. So here's the agenda. We are into the welcome, and we're going to jump into attendance here in a moment. As you can see, we're going to review the charrette, some of the findings from the equity charrette. We're going to talk a little bit about a sort of a top 5 action areas. One of the things that we have recognized is that the number of initiatives that are contemplated is wide and varied, and that for a effective plan to move forward, we wanted to give y'all a combination of your opportunity to shape sort of the top priorities for the Athens-Clarke County, as well as a little bit of input from sort of best practice around the nation. So we'll talk about that, update on the plan, and when you're going to see a draft for your input. You've already given good input on sections 1 through 3, and the more other parts are going to be coming shortly. There is an integration of some of the equity findings that is going to be part of that as well. And then an exciting piece is that there's covers. We've got a couple of options on covers for the report, and sort of some of the imagery that we have put together for that, and to get your initial opinions about that, and then conclusions and wrap up. So I'm going to move forward. Michael, you've already sort of introduced yourself. I'm sort of going to go through the folks that I see on the videos here, and let us know who you're here and representing. So Amy, if you could let us know, not so much introduce yourself, but just catch us up on who you're representing.
Sure. I'm Amy Cassane with WNA Engineering here in Athens.
Andrew, I see you've joined us screen-wise. Thank you for joining in.
Sure. Andrew Saunders, Athens-Clarke County Central Services.
And Aaron, you've introduced yourself as well. Joseph Angelo.
Hi, Joseph D'Angelo, Chief Data Officer, Athens-Clarke County.
Michael, you've spoken a bit, but if you don't mind reminding us your representation.
Yeah, I'm Michael Songster here representing 100% Athens.
Thank you for that. Samantha's introduced herself. Tom Lawrence.
Yeah, hey everybody, Tom Lawrence. I'm the engineering faculty at UGA, but I'm representing the Athens Green Building Council.
Great. And then I see a phone number, obviously an Athens area code, but the first digit's 4 and the last 2 is 00.
Yeah, Charlie Glodanis, Athens Housing Authority.
Great. Thank you, Charlie. And let's see who else we've got. Ilka, I see you're on as well.
Hey, this is Ilka McConnell with Athens-Clarke County Economic Development.
And then someone from JOMA.
John Newland with Joma Construction, and I am representing the Athens Area Home Builders Association.
Great, thank you. Think scrolling here, Brad McCook.
Yes, I'm Brad McCook, Utility Coordinator with Athens-Clarke County.
Great. And Charlie, if I see correctly, you've introduced yourself already, right? I mean, that was a phone number.
Yes, sir.
Great, thank you. And anyone else can help me see anyone else that I might have missed? I think we've got everyone.
Well, Aaron, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, and besides me, just say real quickly what you're there to do in our office now.
Hey, so I'm in the new position of Energy Program and Conservation Coordinator.
Look forward to you tracking some kilowatts, right?
Yep, that's right.
It's always good to be on top of that. Thank you. So a little bit here around attendance. Folks who are, if someone's not in attendance that you know about, please take an opportunity to update them when you see or hear from them in this process. And we'll keep going on to objectives. So we sort of reviewed the agenda a little bit. We've got the charrette review, reviewing the top 5 action areas identified for the plan, update on the plan, and then vote on plan covers. Give an opportunity here if anyone wants to ask any questions about, before we sort of dive into those things, about anything else that they want to see us potentially cover today, if something imperative. We'll move forward then. So here are some of the findings from the equity charrette. Diamond is not joining us, so I'll lead in here, but I will appreciate any fill-in commentary from Matt and Sam from GreenLink. There was really an opportunity in the charrette for folks to open up about the potential of the equity issues in clean energy in particular, and there was a bit of a disconnect between their organizations and the Athens-Clarke County government, and the sort of understanding that we've got a very sort of technical sort of realities around a lot of this information, but that leaves people feeling left out often. And sustainability efforts are hard to plug into, and one of the lessons out of that is that the sort of communications necessity is important, and lack of internet access prevents us from reaching. It's easy for everyone who's got it, but it oftentimes leaves people out, and that to try to do something else to create some connection there is important. Some of the solutions introduced in the plan, sort of a boots on the ground, always a good opportunity to take the time to go into the community in person now that we are past hopefully the worst of COVID, and acknowledging that there likely will be another strain of some sort, but that hopefully it will not be terribly problematic, but that a boots on the ground in person is always a great way to create a community connection, and the idea of a communication liaison for the neighborhood and organizations as a method for making the connections between the potentially impacted and hopefully benefited communities and the planning process and implementation process. And it's easy to forget that this plan is sort of at that high level analysis that sort of helps us make decisions about where to initiate programs, but the actual program design and creation is going to be sort of the next step of these things. Thus, some of that top 5 conversation we're going to be partaking in, and but that the importance of sort of this boots on the ground connection to the communities that hopefully will benefit and who for whom their ability to shape the program is key and critical. And then this idea of creating a clean energy ambassador program in which the outreach is created by members of the community and in which they sort of reach into the community as part of the planning process to ensure that the community's voices get heard. Some things that are not introduced into the plan, but that have opportunities as we sort of develop things and as programs get developed. Partnerships within faith communities, Council on Aging, the Black Chamber. Those are the input from those organizations into a clean energy programming process present a great opportunity. Policies and programs, improving internet access, the idea that the things that inhibit the communities that need the help the most oftentimes prevent them from participating in as deep a way. And so the idea of childcare and food and sustainability meetings to help communities continue their input and sustain their input during development of some of these programs. And then an accountability plan, that idea that the opportunities for these programs to be developed and that the benefits that are hoped for, that those remain connected, and that there is a way in which that if they're not, that then the plan potentially changes and the programs get adapted as needed to make sure that we end up with those benefits that we are anticipating out of these programs.
Sorry, I just wanted to go back a little bit. Yeah, you're good. I wanted to go back a little bit and just clarify that the findings from the equity-driven charrette, that first kind of title, came from a lot of the survey activity that we did at the equity charrette. So of course there were a ton of findings from that survey, but these kind of bullet points are some of the like bigger themes that we found throughout the charrette. And the solutions introduced to the plan, so these are solutions that we've already integrated into a version of the plan that we thought were solutions that were like kind of, again, like a central theme. We heard them a lot through different organizations and at different breakout rooms. The solutions that are not yet introduced into the plan are suggestions of what we'd like to maybe put into the plan, but because they might be more complex policy situations, require larger funding or more thought into them, we don't want to necessarily plop them into the plan without input. So as we're kind of going through what to expect with the next draft, kind of have this in the back of your head while you're reading it, just thinking about solutions not yet introduced into the plan, what equity pieces are missing from the plan that you felt were heard at the charrette, but maybe they're not in the slide or were missed. So yeah, I just wanted to clarify that. I hope that makes sense.
Okay, great, Sam, thanks. And so we've got some time to sort of review this and as Sam said, bring up anything that you feel as though as part of participation that you thought was a particularly good sort of direction. We want to make sure it gets included in the draft. And as Sam mentioned, the sort of inclusion of all of the equity items, we were not able to get the results of the equity charrette into the draft before the sort of timeline does, but those are in process. And as Sam said, some of them are in there and that we will be adding additional ones. So we'll just open it up for sort of conversation amongst anyone who's got any input on that.
So one thing let me just mention, we in the plan itself, the body of the text, we will want to have the summary of the equity charrette probably placed somewhere toward the after the pathways show up, the policy pathways show up, there's a section in there that it would fit in nicely. We also would like as an addendum to have the write-up, which it is more in totality, everything that we heard, so that people can go and look at all the material that we gathered from that equity charrette as an attachment into the back of the report.
Right, so that as a sort of a totality of it, such that we have a record for future review, that if as things come together, that the totality of it gets recorded, but that the parts that are sort of the summary gets included in the body of the report, so that it's very clear that it is intended that it sort of permeate the report, but that there was this step that sort of led to that.
Right. When you get it in there, it'll look, what it'll show is that we did this last step in the plan and what that last step showed. And then I don't mean word for word in the appendix, but an overall summary that picked out all the major things, all the things that were said that we can, obviously in that format for publication.
Right,
But
all the notes that were taken. Right.
Yeah, that way people can see kind of what, as you would communicate as a report, here's what we heard kind of thing. So people can see what all information was gathered, the process that we went through, and then what information we heard as part of that. And that I think will give people kind of that ability to look back and forth and see if they have that interest in what all was discussed.
Yeah, and if it and how it might shape future programs, right? Tom, you have your hand raised.
Available
Please
yet?
unmute and join us.
Yeah, I mean, I just curious. I can't remember about the Clean Energy Ambassador program role. I mean, is there, in whatever is provided, there needs to be probably some better definition of what that person, role, whatever would actually do, and if it's going to be paid, who might cover that? I don't know if what we get submitted, but I could see somebody asking, what is that? What do they do?
Sure.
That's a really good point you bring up also. I think that the definition of a clean energy ambassador, what they do, if it's paid, if it's not paid, is also a conversation we might need to have before adding it to the plan.
I think there's a couple good groups that might be good partnerships. One is the Athens Area Council on Aging has a CSEP program. Stands for Senior Community Service Employment Program. And a lot of times seniors are really well embedded in their community. And then also the Neighborhood Leaders Program has someone in one of 13 districts in ACC. And they're already out sharing information very regularly, and there's kind of serve as connectors in their community. So those are just a couple groups that might be interesting to see if there's some partnerships possible.
I'm sorry, Ilka, you said the Athens Council on Aging, and what was the other one?
There's a new Neighborhood Leaders Program that's partly funded by the county, and it's through Family Connection Communities and Schools.
Okay, thank you.
And you also mentioned a seniors employment council of some sort.
Yeah, I think it's a federal program. It's through the Athens Community Council on Aging. I think it's Athens Area Community Council on Aging. It's a Senior Community Service Employment Program. It's called CSEP.
CSEP.
Yeah, I'm writing it into the economic development chapter, so you'll have a good description of it.
Great.
The other thing that help you guys out is that in the attachment that had the community engagement, there's a list in the back of all the organizations that kind of the index of organizations that we contacted at various points in this in the community engagement section. So I struggle with the word choose partnerships because there's so many out there that process we certainly want to partner in this process, and we will be partnering. So I don't know if it's helpful to refer and say, this is when we have specifics like Ilka's saying that go with specific sections, that makes sense. But then in general, we want to partner with all of those folks who are in the back to help us move the plan forward.
Right. Whoever can see themselves a role for themselves in it, and help them So the idea is that we sort of give all the resources, all the potential connections, and then the outreach is there. And to Tom, to your question about the ambassador, that's the sort of the real question about, how do communities without the sort of resources to participate in some of these things, how do we get them the resources so that we can create the sort of connections? And I think was sort of the vision around the ambassador. Sam or Lacey, I can't remember, Lacey, how much you were taking notes at the charrette, but anything else on the ambassador in particular that sort of would help maybe clarify some of that role, and anybody else have input on that? And Tom, I see you got your hand up still. Do you want to jump in again, or was that just a residual?
Nope, sorry.
No worries.
There's some of the things I'm used to participating in. Once you respond, that automatically lowers. But so no worries.
Yeah, Zoom's that way. So, but no, thank you for that. Yeah, but anything else on the ambassadors that we can remember from the charrette itself, or descriptions of their roles?
I think the main point is to have somebody who is working with the city of Athens, whether that's directly in the government, directly like in the office with them, or through some other organization. It would be a paid opportunity, and it would basically be somebody who, one, has a technical background and understands, like the ins and outs of some of these energy concepts and sustainability concepts, and then also is someone who is directly engaged with the community, so they're able to kind of act as this liaison to communicate the language back to.
Gotcha. So that does sort of bring up a model I know about, as far as community input into zoning and planning efforts. Is there a system that exists around that currently in Athens that we might be able to sort of tap into?
Let me let Aaron address that, because he came out of the planning department, and that's one of the things that our office will be active in.
Yeah, currently there's not really anything like that. It would be a nice way to bridge planning and sustainability, which I think is an important bridge at this point.
Yeah, if there were sort of regular sort of meetings that some of the staff member could attend to sort of update on processes, but then have the sort of other more direct connections to some of the organizations in particular, as mentioned, the faith community and the like. So to really get to the people who stand to benefit from some of the programs. Okay. Anything else on the other thoughts on the equity charrette? Okay. I don't see anything else here. I'm quickly see if there's any other hands raised. I think not. All right, we'll move on to the next agenda item. Sort of top 5 action areas. Again, the idea here was that we sort of get sort of broad categories that sort of perhaps encompass larger, potentially even multiple sort of the clean energy pathways. And these are basically, we'll tell you sort of where they came from. They are not by any means set in stone. This is really your opportunity to sort of give us your input on these going forward. But we'll sort of go through them a little bit, and you'll sort of see their role in shaping sort of actions in development of programs after the planning is done. So leading by example is a sort of a national best practice on clean energy. And really what this is sticking to the goal that has been established by the ACC government, and really doing it in a way that makes the most sort of sense. So benchmarking your own buildings, your own energy use, which is already underway, auditing, and so doing those first assessments to identify those clean energy improvements, tuning for current use, buildings that may be changed in use or out of not performing as well as the benchmarking reveals how they're performing, tuning them for their best use and sort of discovering what opportunities are there. And then once you've sort of done all those improvements that have the best return, then investing in renewable energy, either directly on the building or through a solar energy procurement agreement. And so what this does is allows the ACC Gov to sort of, again, lead by example and to sort of set the tone, if you will, in the community around the procedures around their municipal buildings. And so that's number one. And then we really heard during the equity shred among all the other CAB meetings, as well as other stakeholder outreach that was done, that investment in the community, and so building the community through investment. And so one of the best programs to do that is weatherization programs. Weatherization in particular, it helps low-income homeowners reach into and sort of stabilize their energy usage. It is basic sort of things around air drafty leaks and insulations and other sort of proper home usage upgrades. And it is a well-established federal program. It may not be the most well-funded, but it is well-established. It has great standards and procedures associated with it. And the real thing that's needed is investment in this. And so and the local agency that implements that is called Action, and making sure that they sort of help with the procedures around weatherization and really reaching into communities. This helps stabilize communities, gives sort of generational use of homes through a variety of improvements. Helps homes stay in the families and build generational wealth, and as well as reduce energy bills and helps keep money in the community. So building community through investment with a more active engagement in weatherization. Now, one of the things that's sort of, before I leave that too much, is that that is sort of focused on homeowners, but there are other programs that will probably be part of number two here. Let me go back to that for a moment. In addition to sort of weatherization in particular, weatherization is sort of a larger number or larger sort of concept. We envision that solving the sort of issues around the split incentive with residential rental property between landlords and residents. The issue being that residents pay the bills, the building managers don't really have much incentive to making improvements. This is one of the biggest problems that we have around that, and so around sort of clean energy in parts of disadvantaged communities. And so we envision that sort of in the rental program, that Athens would be a leader in this. It is, as I said, one of the bigger sort of nuts to crack, if you will. And so, if anybody can do it, Athens can pull it off. And so we are going to be including that as if we're here for discussion today as a top 5 action area. Being part of the larger solution. Please.
I'm sorry, I was just going to say, before you leave that, I think the other corollary that goes with that is addressing sub standard housing, because that's been another big problem, especially in low income areas, where you got to get one done before you can do the other, and that is a more complex. It is identified as a problem, but for the government, that's a more complex solution.
Okay.
I would also recommend that and say active partnerships with agencies such as Action, because the Athens Land Trust also does weatherization. I also think I was about to say, I think Council on Aging does some, but not to the level of the other two, but certainly Habitat does some as well. So,
Okay. And I did hear through the chat that perhaps I'm having, I do not have a problem projecting, but perhaps my microphone may be picking up. So I'm going to move my computer a little bit closer here, and hopefully that will pick up that issue. So good points on that, Mike. It is always good to work with agencies, whoever is most effectively delivering what you've got. So thank you for that.
Well, and I was just gonna say, I mean, it seems like we need to mention housing and community development because, I mean, they're the ones they're really the ones who have their fingers on the pulse, so to speak, of the organizations and agencies in the community that are doing these things, and often most of these are getting funding through them. So I think we need to mention that, you know, as they are maybe our primary partner in identifying the most effective agencies out there and delivering that kind of service.
And tapping into community development block grants and things that might be sources of funding for that. Let me write that down, CDBG. It does also bring up the question, the sort of larger question, and I'll do a quick scan of raised hands here. I'm sorry if I missed you earlier there, Amy. But the the housing authority, and I'm not sure if how that's entitled there as far as the name, but that the sort of housing community development is sort of the government ACCG Gov's sort of department, I'm assuming, and then is it separate? I'm assuming there's a housing authority is separate, and they've got their own sort of issues with efficiency and quality of housing and that sort of thing. I'm making an assumption there.
Yes, sir. The housing authority is chartered under state enabling legislation, but we're totally separate from the city.
Right. Okay.
And Charlie's our rep. So hey Charlie, is there something we need to add in there for Athens Housing Authority as well?
We could.
I'm assuming you want us to work with you.
We always work with you.
I know you. If you didn't, I wouldn't be laughing.
Yeah, so that's a great example of where you might run your first pilot program, and doing efficiency upgrades and seeing what sort of benefits you get when you've got participants who are willing to share their data. They don't have to, obviously, but ones who are. Those are some examples of some of the programs we've seen around that are good practices.
Yeah, good point. We've done a good bit of that. Probably not as scientifically as we need to, but anytime we do improvements, we try to get energy efficiency. That's our main thing.
Great. Yeah. So sort of seeing and sort of as you said, in a sort of scientific way, sort of tracking the potential energy and seeing what the impacts are and seeing how much you can sort of drive that and drive it without sort of maximizing your investment, if you will, and sort of finding other funds for those things. So, okay.
Yeah,
anything else on building community through investment?
Yeah, what I was going to say is what we've done. What I found, water is the easiest thing to measure. And, electricity and gas is kind of hard because as the weather changes, so then you got to get into the whole degree day thing, and it's kind of difficult. But water's we found is fairly easy to measure, and we've really been impressed with the savings we've gotten when we've done water conservation measures.
Good news. Good news. And going back to some of the measures, as you said, the degree days, there are some softwares that do model projected improvements, not so much on sort of past modeling as far as tracking weather, but I know there are some software improvements that or software that include the degree day projections and sort of and can help you decide about what are your best first investments. So anybody, Matt or Sam, anything you want to add on some of the software stuff? I mean, I know that's a little bit more on the south face weatherization side of things, but anything that you've heard about in benefits there?
That's a winding rabbit hole to try to go down into. I mean, I've published a few scientific papers on the topic, and there's all kinds of fancier or simpler methods to deriving that.
Yeah.
But I think they generally kind of point around the same kind of stuff. It's just more or less refined, and then how good your to the point you were just saying, Robert, like how good your climate forecast is at a micro level to inform that about any sort of change that you would see from historical data.
Right. And so that the bigger sort of takeaway that we've sort of heard about is the diligence to have the testing and associated sort of quality of the improvements, as well as the tracking, is really helpful in determining how effective your program is being. Okay, we'll move on to item number 3 here. So being part of the larger solution. So Michael, you had mentioned earlier about the IRP, and so the sort of intervening in the IRP, creating partnerships with similar cities. We knew this was in the works to a degree. Our work with other cities as well, and so we really sort of see the potential here for an impact. It's been very hard with the organizations, the nonprofit organizations who have been undertaking this work in the past, and the system itself has a lot of sort of problems that as soon as you get any sort of momentum around a particular program, it gets killed, and so suddenly your workforce is not available anymore, and all kinds of other problems around integrated resource planning, in particular with efficiency and the like. But we've also seen some of the benefits of the interventions that really drove a lot of the investments 4 or 5 years ago in solar, and that's where George Power really discovered that solar is their least expensive generation method. The least expensive method is still least expensive resource is still energy efficiency, but they of course have less interest in that. So the creating partnerships with other cities and having that be an ongoing, consistent work, also involving into the demand side management working group, which happens sort of in the off years between the IRP timing, to try to build knowledge around some of these programs. And so that is a sort of being part of that larger solution. Ultimately, what we're going to find in all the findings is that until unless you have control over your actual source of energy and can eliminate carbon-based sources out of that, you will have a hard time eliminating them all completely. And so working at this level we seem is important. Amy, I saw you raise your hand.
I thought maybe we should add to be part of the larger solution, that facilitating and incentivizing private developers, the commercial sector. I mean, obviously that's a huge part of really being successful in this effort. So, how can we do that? How can we help innovation happen with the private and commercial sectors? So.
Yeah, and I heard incentives on that as the primary source.
I don't have the answer, but whether, I know we've had plenty of conversations throughout the process about, working with the private sector on how we do that. And so I think there's lots of ideas out there. And that's another thing, I think not just creating, partnerships with similar cities, but looking at how other cities are doing it. What are they doing? I mean, no need to recreate the wheel, but I think as far as a larger solution, that's got to be part of that. So.
Okay. We will add that to that as well.
Playing off that as well, and I don't know if you have, I don't see number 5 yet, Robert, but the education aspect of it. So and I'm talking there about helping people understand not only how this is relevant to them, but also how they get involved in the process at the local and state level and national level. That includes both the larger community, so providing that kind of baseline information for what these things are. And then the other is for businesses itself, because we found in Athens that we have some businesses that are way out ahead of the government. I mean, they are just light years away ahead. W&A has done a tremendous amount of things at the local level, Terrapin, some of our other industries as well. At the same time, we have other smaller industries and some other bigger ones that are sitting there going, well, I'm even not even sure what questions to ask because I just don't feel I'm confident. So some of it is us facilitating, that peer-to-peer learning process. So that kind of community broad-based understanding of both how it's relevant and how to be involved and shape the community through what they want to see happen. And the same thing really with the businesses as well.
Good points, Mike.
Just on, sorry, on
creating
that
that sort of
line, Mike.
community of people that are involving themselves around that and making sure that they have the sort of base of knowledge to be valuable in that process. I'm sorry, Amy, if I cut you off there.
No, I was just thinking when Mike was talking about the peer-to-peer thing that we should have a note in there, something about Athens-Clarke County's, I guess it's this Denise's group, the Sustainability Roundtable, which is completely, I mean, that is completely what that's about, is, connecting industries and businesses and everything and hearing from them about, and it goes beyond renewable energy, but amplifying what they're doing and helping them, that could be, a tool right there for that educational process and to really bring them into this.
I think that you definitely, this is a little bit of a side joke, you definitely got to get the right speaker, because the integrated resource planning process will put people to sleep. But but I think the peer-to-peer element and the sort of planning on sort of grassroots is the word grassroots is sort of jumped in my head as you all were sort of describing that as sort of creating this understanding that sort of helps it carry through the years, because this really is what I anticipate coming out of the sort of the strategy around IRP is almost a 10-year sort of approach to it, so that you sort of can sort of set some goals that if you by the time if you don't have some accomplishments at some point, you sort of do what you can to escalate that to the elected officials and things like that. Make sure I'm not missing any hands here. I think we're good. So we're going to move on to number 4, which is still also another one that we heard really around sort of the equity issue in particular, and it sort of links to number 2 in the sense that you want to have programs that are up and running and are making large investments in the community, and then you want those investments to benefit the community that they are coming from and the people in those communities just directly through the sort of residents, but also the people potentially installing these improvements. And so building the workforce and to improve opportunities is in sort of to be a participant in that sort of green workforce and to build that pipeline. Now, it's a bit of the chicken and the egg thing. You definitely have to have the programs up and running. You definitely have to have enough funding to create a large sort of demand for the skills. And so it is sort of making sure that you've got the ongoing partnerships with schools and businesses and apprenticeship programs and technical colleges and all those things that are necessary for sort of building the system to fill the pipeline of jobs and as I mentioned, so that to be able to survive the risk of program cuts over time. You don't want to train someone and have them go through something and there not be any jobs at the end. So sort of balancing those 2 elements is definitely a part of that. But this is definitely another community building this is here because of what we heard about the importance on community building, and to be able to connect the clean energy, sort of the abstraction of the clean energy, down into the community and make it real for people. And I think we've got a nice list already of resources in this sector that we will be including as part of that. Okay.
So I have a question about what the apprenticeship programs is supposed to encompass. Is that any within the community? We're talking about things like the young urban builders at the land trust. Are we talking about stuff that happens through our education system? Are we talking about labor organization apprenticeship programs? Because it does seem like that labor organizations are excluded partially from this list if they're not included in that.
Well, let me help a little bit, because I think I can put some perspective on, since this is at the end of the day, this is a government plan. I think there are three buckets that these things fall into that we need to be cognizant of. One of them is, what can an Athens-Clarke County government directly do? Because there are limitations on what the government can do. So we want to make clear what it is that the county can do. Some of that is public education. Some of that is training, particularly when it comes to ACC's own positions. And then creating mentorship positions within Athens-Clarke County, again, for they're geared toward ACC positions. Then there comes to the second bucket, is supporting community economic and workforce development. So what can Athens-Clarke County as a government facilitate or promote? And that might be things like support or facilitate some education, or find some funding to support apprentices, Michael, to your point of apprenticeships, which we would then have to define and see where they're most effective and best placed to do that. Funding for labs or training areas, there may be some room for that as well. Some training. For example, one of the difficulties you run into is there's no real lab for people to come to learn how to expand on solar education, solar wiring and things that go with solar and installing solar. So could there be a lab that gets installed for those types of training opportunities? And then I think there's some things where we can start defining what the community's economic and workforce development opportunities are. Some things that the community can do as kind of what it would be. And that's going to be some of the workforce groups that are already doing great work. So we don't need to, as a government, duplicate with what they're doing. So I think there's going to be these kind of three-pronged approach to this section that's going to better define. And we've been working through that as of recent.
And Michael, we definitely want to make sure that that in the drafts that you are soon to see, you will see labor organizations mentioned, and all the sort of opportunities in that. So that was definitely something we heard in the process as well, and it is sort of mentioned in there in the generalities of what we're talking about around workforce development as well. But we will make sure that it gets included in the specifics of a top 5 action area around workforce and improved opportunities.
Michael, can you share like 2 sentences about what you mean about labor organizations and workforce development training that they offer?
Well, so I mean, I think that there are. I mean, I don't know how active labor organizations are in Athens construction. They're probably more so in the commercial sector. I mainly do residential, and I don't see them much. But say the IBEW, I know, has apprenticeship programs that they do, and I don't know how directed they are at specifically training people for solar electrical installations, but I think that if we're having a conversation about building a workforce and we're discussing equity, that not explicitly talking about labor organizations is kind of a big omission. And
okay,
that's really all I'm saying. And to Mike's point about the three-pronged approach, I don't know where this might fall into it, but I think that there may be a fourth prong to that, which is the induced demand of Athens-Clarke County's spending on their own projects, which is not insignificant. And so, and I think that we had a discussion earlier about the role that procurement by ACC could play in inducing demand. And so I think that that needs to be brought into consideration as well as part of solving somewhat of the chicken and egg problem that you mentioned, Robert.
Thanks. That's really helpful. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Let's see. All right. Anything else on building workforce and improving opportunities? Quick hand check here. See anything? So we'll go to number 5. And then closing the gap, as I sort of mentioned, the IRP. As long as the utilities are supplying, still utilizing carbon-based generation, the renewable energy credits are an option. This is number 5 for a reason. It's one of the last things you should pursue. And y'all did great work on sort of defining the importance of spending that. If there's any RECs to be bought, that they be bought locally, that they focus on building community in addition to supplying the energy, and then stepping outward from there with sort of national RECs as being the last. And so the sort of that strategy as a 5th priority, while it is something we're going to make clear that this is something that is put off, not so much delayed necessarily, but just strategically placed in the sequence of things that you do to meet your goals, and that you prepare for them enough in advance that you do have the funding that you need to complete that. So and so just to sort of get a little bit of an explanation around renewable energy credits, for those of you who perhaps aren't deep into the idea is that the someone who who creates a renewable energy generation of some sort can sell into a market the particular kilowatt hours that they are putting onto the grid, and people who buy those at certain rates do that to fulfill their particular commitments around renewable energy. I may have slaughtered that a little bit, but I know Matt can speak to it, but I did see Andrew raise his hand. So Andrew, you want to unmute and ask your question?
Sure, thank you. I just have a question. I agree that it's probably number 5 and not as heavily weighted, but I'd ask that we be careful. I want to be sure that you don't cut this one off at the pass, because I actually think there may be a really creative opportunity to use RECs to accomplish some of the other activities that are identified in the plan. So, for example, we can't give money out, right? There's the Georgia gratuities clause that restricts that. However, a local REC is in fact a market product. And so if we had a goal to grow renewable energy, both maybe on affordable housing and to achieve RECs, it might be that we end up buying RECs, creating those agreements to purchase locally from specific areas of emphasis, and in fact then do have a mechanism to help backstop some of those initiatives. And so all I ask is that when we do RECs, don't necessarily frame it as do this in 2035. Just say maybe not as high a priority as the others, but As long as we're not saying like it's the last thing you need to do to meet your commitment sequentially, that may end up harming us a bit.
But speaking to that sort of integration with your other goals and how they could be used to drive them as appropriate.
Right.
And then,
thank you.
And I defer to others who know a lot better, more than I do about this, but are there other avenues that can also close the gap? Things like microgrids, and I know some of those are at the state level that we have to get approval for, but even looking at the possibility of having local industries with large roof areas essentially become, like to Andrew's point, a rec producer that we could then enter an agreement with. So are there other options beyond just buying it? I mean, can we help develop it is really what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and that's one of the challenges. I'll let Sam or Matt sort of speak to this a little bit, but it is the challenge of the Territorial Act is to, you know, where you can actually put them and whatnot. And so there really is a combination of the IRP intervention as well, making sure that there is the opportunity to be putting these things onto the grid in such a way that you can do them. So the idea that you know Athens just builds a giant array that sort of takes care of it is problematic because of how do you sort of sell those electrons, if you will. But hopefully that sort of gets to your point and sort of integrating that with the integrated resource plan sort of strategy in particular as to what are the things you want to bring up and make sure that you have that renewable energy has access to the grid as much as there is demand for.
Sounds good.
Anything else on that? Any sort of clarification on RECs? Did I slaughter the REC explanation so bad that you want to chime in, Matt? Feel free to do a great job of explaining that.
I would just say the Territorial Act is kind of the key thing that we have to watch and try to work around, and that the Public Service Commission ruled almost a decade ago that if the electricity hits the wire, like hits the grid, then the RECs that were generated from that resource also belong to Georgia Power. So figuring out, you know, if we wanted to set up a program that was going to do some sort of like low income solar benefit around that, we'd have to be aware and plan pretty intentionally with that in mind, or look to try to get the commission to change their own ruling in that case.
Matt, I think that's a very good point. Does the viability of on-site storage change that at all? You know, in theory, you could argue that it's no longer hitting the grid.
If the system is not grid interconnected, then I don't, at a minimum, the commission has not ruled on that. So if it's
but just the fact of having it, the building interconnected to the grid and renewable energy on the building is going to be a policy barrier, is what I'm hearing.
It could be, yeah.
Okay.
So at some point, I'd like to hear what some ideas, Matt, that you might have on how we skirt around that. Or I always think that those kind of things are just more like temporary stops. So what is it that we could? What's the play to get around it and make it work?
To a degree, that's Mike. To a degree, that's going to be sort of part of this REC strategy as the deliverable ultimately in the report. So I think that that some of those strategies are in those pathways already. But Matt, if you want to sort of talk a little bit about some of the sort of near things that I know you've been working with advocacy teams and some of the nonprofits supporting the work that you've been working with them on.
Yeah, I mean, just real briefly on that front, there's been a discussion for the last 4 years at the commission about trying to get a community solar program set up that municipalities could actually engage with, because the way that those have been structured in the past, depending on the municipalities' own procurement rules, in many instances, have not been legal for them to engage in, and that's kind of been proved out in the most recent iteration of the community solar programs that have been put forward in the IRP. There's a new series of programs being put forward, proposed by Georgia Power in this IRP, and so I think that would be a fruitful spot for the coalition of local governments here to try to weigh in.
Thanks, Matt. So we are running out of time for this sector. I think we've got a little bit of room. I don't think some of the follow-ons will necessarily take too long, but we've got some good notes here, in particular working around on the building the community through weatherization and whatnot. We talked about the importance of addressing substandard housing and the additional agencies like the Athens Land Trust, and the Housing and Community Development departments, as well as the Athens Housing Authority. And then on the making sure that the, double check here real quick. Yeah, being part of the larger solution, involving sort of peer-to-peer learning around the private sectors, and then on the building a workforce and improvement opportunities, making sure that we have a mention of the labor organizations and inclusion of that, and Mike did a nice job sort of and then adding a fourth from Michael Songster around of where those investments might come from, and then the REC program strategy, sort of specific areas or goals that the RECs go to, and so to me those are great additions and what we were hoping for to hear on this on these action areas. And I saw, as we were doing this, I saw nodding heads, and so I'll give you a sort of a last opportunity here that if you have any concern about these, to let us know, and you'll have the opportunity inside of the process. But go ahead and speak up now. Amy, I see you raising your hand.
When Mike was talking for one of them and was talking about the public education, I mean, I guess I know that's an aspect of several of these for sure, but is that something we want to pull out as a top action area, or is it just important in all action areas?
You sort of speaking to sort of curriculum at schools, or a different sort of public education, or
I guess community education and engagement, and maybe that's really that first one. I can't remember how they're each laid out exactly, but.
And business, and Amy, you're speaking to my heart as an educator. I love it.
And so really we could sort of expand that into, as you sort of talk about the combination of leading by example and building community through investment, but really just, Athens in the leading by example, communicating about that as part of a community education element. I like the idea of it being potentially even as its own standalone sixth priority. I'm seeing some nodding heads on that as well. So I think that sort of building the base of support for this through that does seem to make sense. So any comments on that?
Yeah, I think I would be tempted to call it community education and engagement, because, and I do think it kind of is a standalone, because you don't want to, I think when you look back at our community sessions and the equity, I think it's kind of the underlying point in a lot of the criticisms or comments or suggestions, just that we just have to continuously work at that and figure out how to reach as many people as possible and engage as many people as possible.
I want to thank you for lifting that up. I'm sorry I'm late, but yeah, definitely. I'm right there with you on that, Amy. Thank you so much for lifting that up.
And I think too, if you really think about the skill sets that are associated with these green jobs, they're not necessarily new. They're pivots of existing technologies. And so the same barriers that already exist to having people know and be aware and be able to access some of those training programs will still be there. So, you know, it's super important for us to try to figure out how to address those barriers, not just for these quote unquote green jobs, but also for all the skill sets that underlie them.
Good point. And so, and just a reminder, you know, again, these priorities are going to encompass the sort of wide range of pathways that GreenLink outlines. So remember, we've got this really nice big list of pathways. And so one of the things, there are many of those sort of very sort of detailed pathways that will sort of fall up underneath these priorities. And so there may be sort of, you know, subsets, if you will, inside of these priorities, but we will definitely add that. We're seeing good support around the idea of adding a community education and engagement priority, and we may even probably move that up on the list a bit, maybe slide it into the number 2 slot as a level of importance. So thank you all for that input. And
hey, Robert,
please.
Sorry, before we move on, I do want to ask, particularly John, you and Amy, Michael, those of you who are actually involved in the development and construction world, are there things that could be developed that are incentives for the private side, whether they do address owned buildings or rental buildings? Those are some things I still feel like we're weak in. We haven't really gotten as much in those areas that we can engage that direction. So anything that y'all can email over to us, or if you want to say it now, whichever way. But I really think that that's an area we could lean heavily on you guys to help provide that and round that out.
So I think the one thing that ties in with the idea of community education is continuing education credits for contractors, and the opportunities for those are not particularly broad here in Athens. And building inspection at times has done some where they bring somebody in to do it, but if we had some directed, focused continuing education specifically on, say, high performance building, I think that would go a long way towards both educating local builders as to what is possible, and also giving them something that they want, which is a continuing education credit, locally. So that's one thing. As far as the actual improvement of the building stock, I'm still in the position where I believe that building codes are the way we do that. I don't know that incentives have ever proven to move the mark on that very much.
Yeah, I would generally agree with Michael. The Home Builders Association has been ramping up the amount of continuing ed offerings that they have. So that is good. And, to the workforce development, one thing, and this is kind of slightly off topic, but I think it is or has been under discussion, is with the Athens-Tech of reinstating their building construction program and modeling it on actually, the Gwinnett Tech has a very robust program that started about the same time that the Athens did, and then Athens, for whatever reason, it didn't work out and has not continued on. But there has been talk at the state level with the Home Builders Association and with some legislation that I think is going through to help increase funds for that. And hopefully that can also go to Athens and help them redo that, because we really don't have any local construction, training, so to speak.
Okay.
Thinking about what Michael was saying, and then also John, right? John with Troma. When I was at Athens Tech, running the economic development division, we did a continuing ed summit every year for forestry because they need annual continuing ed, and that really helped us reach our benchmarks for training and reach new audiences. So I think that would be a great area of partnership for continuing ed credits, potentially where that we could partner with them.
And one thing that would help me, Ilka, John, Michael, if there's anything that just kind of understand what that pathway is for sustainability office to be able to help facilitate that. You know, what would our role be and how could we do that? We advocate for or just try to facilitate it? Do we help coordinate it? Do we try to advocate for money for it? So just kind of understanding what that role would be, it would be helpful for me.
I would like to
Especially for
add,
Aaron.
I would like to add that a few weeks ago, the school board met with the Career Academy staff, and one of the pathways that they are really interested in building out is that building and construction program. So I just suggest that also when those discussions are being had, that the leadership of the Career Academy is brought in as well, because that's an area that they are truly looking to focus on as a pathway. I wanted to just bring that out.
Thank you. All right.
Yeah, Mike, I don't know about the role of sustainability office, but there may be a three-way partnership between the Home Builders Association, Sustainability Office, and Building Inspection to facilitate a program. You know, identifying who could come in and teach it, identifying venues, and then promoting it. And Sustainability Office, you know, looking towards more sustainability focused subjects. You know, that may be something that could work. I'm actually not a member of the Home Builders Association, and so I don't know where they do their continuing ed. A lot of times they did it during their I think their monthly lunch and learn meetings. But more intensive, like 4-hour programs, are typically what I've participated in, and they have often been at the auditorium at planning and building inspection. So something like that may work, and John may have some ideas for that.
Yeah. Well, Michael, you need to join. They do have, like, even today there was a full day, I think, a lead paint class, and they usually do have 1 to 2, and they are the 4 to 8 hour type classes, not like the lunch meeting, you know, eat and learn type thing. So like I said, they've been really ramping that up because there is a need locally. We've been having to go to Atlanta or do online stuff. So it's good that they've been able to do it, and we're certainly looking to do more. And we often do have inspectors from Athens and Oconee County come in and talk about changes that have been made to the code. So yeah, we're always looking for more opportunities to get the information out there.
And I will do a little self plug. You know, we've got a good relationship with the Greater Atlanta Home Builders, and do have some training we do with them as well. So we'll look to that partnership as a source of that as well. So I do want to keep us moving. I'm going to do a quick search here, make sure nobody's got their hands up, but let's move on to the next sort of topic area. I really appreciate the input on the top 5. I think that will now top 6. I do think that will help us and help ACC Gov to prioritize and to pick up some of these big impactful projects. So thank you all for that input. Update on the plan in general, what to expect coming up. Between the 23rd and the 31st, we're going to be receiving chapters 1 through 6. We've got a sort of a numbering sections is something we're using currently as well. So you'll be receiving that here in the not too distant future. We've had some good internal reviews on that. When you do get it, you will have 10 days and 2 weekends to review. And so to the degree we are trying to get into some of the city commission review processes. And so to the degree that you're able to help us by moving quickly on that review, we appreciate it. A lot of it you've already seen, so really focus on those areas that you have particular input on and particular knowledge around as well. And we will be providing you a guide list of the things on feedback, and as well as how to put it in there so that we can maximize the sort of delivery of that. So please do try to follow that feedback guide list, and that way we can make sure that one, you get your comments get included, and that they are tracked, and we can sort of, obviously people who say this, if a lot of people say the same thing, that's something that's going to rise above, but to be able to track that is helpful. So please do, if you do have problems sort of following that, let us know, and we'll try to figure out how to help you follow that guide list. And just a reminder that it is members of your team and sort of the sort of immediate folks who are supporting you in this effort, but it is meant for internal review only. It is not meant for dissemination. The effort here is as a CAB member to keep it as internal as possible, and you are ultimately advising the ACC Gov and its recommendations, and then ultimately for adoption by the elected officials. So I believe that's it on that. Yeah. Any questions on that in particular? And Mike, do you have any other sort of enhancements on that?
I was just going to mention internal. We're looking at you as CAB members to reach out to your CAB members. Not your CAB members, to your organizational members, and get their feedback as well. Give us a chance. What we're asking is, don't reach out to a commissioner and begin to ask questions. But if those questions, let us get that together so we have a final version, and that's what we'll present to the commission with your including your recommendation along those lines. So it is to be shared, but it's to be shared internally with your organization, so your organization can give us a feedback based on what you're seeing there.
Thanks, Mike. Any questions or comments about that? Great. Okay. We'll move on then to the sort of fun and exciting part. Voting on covers. So we've got a couple of options on the covers. They're basically plays on a similar thing, but they've got some fun distinctions to them. I will share them one at a time, and then and talk a little bit about sort of what they share in common, and then we'll just sort of open up for commentary. One moment here. I do have to sort of figure out the stop sharing thing. I will escape out of the PowerPoint.
Yeah, there you go.
Look to get rid of that. And now, let's see. Mike, you're gonna have to help me with the sharing again. I do not see where it is.
Your cursor at the top of your screen, and then a little toolbar will come down and it'll be orange. It should be, and it says stop sharing.
Seeing that earlier. I'm not having a little trouble.
Let's see if I can.
Let me do this. Let me expand my screen here. See if that doesn't help it. Nope.
Right.
This and see if that doesn't help it.
All right.
Maybe
One thing I
just
can
share
do.
so much that I'm not able to get at it. But
all right, let me try this for you, Robert. I'm going to knock you off as a presenter, and then I'm going to take myself out of sharing.
Okay.
I think that'll work.
There we go. That's better access.
Did that? Let's see if I mess something up by doing that. Hopefully
I'm
not.
looking good here, Mike. I'm going to go ahead and share now the covers. actually, what I'm gonna, let's see, I don't want to share a whole screen. I want to share these. Yes, here we go. Got the
Excellent.
So there is. I need to cycle through. So here's the agenda. Then let's see. To change to this one. So sharing the app. Let me do this. Let me stop that and close this and go try that one more time. Here we go. Okay. So let's get to where I can see it fully here. So the green is obviously an obvious choice, but this is a bit of a cooler green color. The sort of putting Athens as a something that is incomplete on the first line and continues as sort of an imagery used to create sort of a sense that this is the beginning of something and that we are going to be continuing on, and then keeping it fairly clean at the bottom with the clean and renewable energy plan, and then sort of the sources of this, the Athens-Clarke County crest, and then the consultants' names. Obviously, the sort of big feature here is the background statue, and that sort of forward-looking sort of imagery out of that. Right, and then let's go to the second one. Again, a play on this, but a little bit even simpler. Same sort of word imagery, but without the sort of the statue element as part of it. But again, a cool green color and a fairly bold graphic element, with the idea being that it is a fairly bold step for a local government to step into something like this, and so it really demonstrates Athens' leadership. So I do want to sort of open it up for comments and thoughts on these. I feel a little back to my days in college when I'm presenting my architecture presentations and trying to relay the thought processes behind something that is a graphic element. So to the degree that I might not have done that justice, please help me with the other comments and thoughts on those.
Given these two choices, I would go with the one without the statue as a background. I just think a white goddess is not necessarily I know she's the symbol, but I just don't know if that's, I don't know. I don't think that's what we want. But I'm not sure that I would have gotten the Athens incomplete without an explanation. I think I would have probably, I don't know. I'm not sure. I would think I might have thought, what's going on? Did they make a mistake? Was this a misprint? It's just.
Okay, good feedback.
So Amy has pretty much encapsulated my feelings completely and accurately. I do think it is a little bit dangerous to make a decision that could be perceived as an error easily. And better to maybe graphically represent that in some way that doesn't look like the font was just too big to fit across the page and it got cut off. But I'm also, I feel I prefer the one without the statue.
I think my feedback is that I would want someone to notice clean and renewable energy plan first before Athens, since when they read it, they're probably in Athens already.
Okay.
So I like Athena, not because it's Athena, but because it adds some kind of image diversity to the plan. Otherwise, you just have a green cover and could have done that anyhow. I do think that the criticism of Athena gives me pause to realize that maybe that's not the way to go. So, and I would agree with the comments on having Athens split kind of blows up my brain.
A little bit of the intention, I would think, that this is a big, bold step, and so clean energy as an abstract concept is sort of one of the inspirations here. But good, keep coming with the feedback. I appreciated it.
I don't have anything new to add, but I strongly do not like the statute being in the background. And I do like the idea of actually emphasizing the clean and renewable energy a little bit more than the Athens. I agree with that as well.
Andrew, I'm sorry, you put something in the chat and I missed it. I'm sorry if I pull it up if I can here.
No, I don't know that I did.
So I have a question. Is there, just out of curiosity, is there any symbol that people would think truly represents Athens? I mean, I'll be honest, I can't think of one, but is there any one symbol, if we ever were to use it, that we feel like captured Athens?
The arches, or the city hall.
Or a ginkgo leaf.
Oh, I gotta stop. Sorry. The guy who's all focused in native plants, and I just can't do it. I can't do a non-native plant on the cover.
I know, I'm sorry. It's an ancient tree. It's an ancient tree, though.
It is. I just struggle with that. I'm so sorry. That is absolutely just a reaction to the guy spending the time
Gary,
working
you
on
have
that.
caused my pain, sir. No, I'm just teasing.
Ouch.
I know it's often used, but I believe, just culturally, I'm just going to be real. I do believe the city hall is is safer if we want to be safe. I mean, we may not want to be safe, but but if we are, I think just looking at, we all throughout this process we've talked about equity and diversity, and with the history, if we, I just believe that, something that is more abstract than, not the arches, not the, while a lot of people do love the Bulldogs, that we still have some history and some other things that we are working towards as it relates to equity and our history here in Athens. And so I do believe City Hall, that is a safer one that could be used, or something that demonstrates clean energy. I don't know, solar, something like that demonstrates what this is. That's my suggestion.
Thank you for that. We heard very clearly, sort of in sort of initial discussions around this, that we don't necessarily want UGA to be perfectly, completely associated with it. So that was sort of off the table from the beginning. City Hall was something we had considered as part of the process, and I like hearing that that's a safer, potentially a safer bet. But then the idea of pictures of clean energy, right? And so we wanted to make sure that something we considered, was there a shot that had a solar energy installation, but then we start getting into the question of, are we investing in solar energy, or are we investing in the community? And sort of how do you show investments in the community? And somebody caulking an air seal, doing an air sealing effort is not exactly something that communicates perfectly that well. So, but your inputs are all very valuable. So maybe something. What I'm hearing is maybe something that involves City Hall as sort of a symbol of Athens, and then the naming of the plan being more prominent, and any particular color. I mean, this in particular comment on the color, the sort of the cooler sort of green on this is is the sort of leafy green of grass seemed to be inappropriate, but something a little cooler that sort of goes with the more modern palettes these days.
I just had one thought. I mean, so this is for Athens-Clarke County. And I think sometimes people out in the county, they just see Athens, they think, here we go again. It's an Athens-centric city municipal thing. I mean, one possibility might be to use like the outline of the county in some way as a background image for it, with City Hall like in the location where Athens is, but call it Athens-Clarke County, clean, something like that. I'm not a graphic person, so that's as far as I'm going to go with it. So
good thoughts though. Okay. What if the instead of the Athens sort of split off of the page, we use the Athens-Clarke County crest sort of split off the page? Do you think that would read still as a mistake, or is that something that would sort of create the dynamism and pull in the county as well? Still some discomfort with the splitting the page, I'm feeling. Yeah, okay.
They're being mighty quiet there, Robert. But
Yeah,
I think you're reading the screens
crickets,
right.
Crickets can say a lot of things. So okay. All right, I think we've got some good feedback on this. It sounds as though we probably need a little more effort on this one, and so we will take that into the process. Can't promise that we're necessarily going to be able to have more discussion, but this has been helpful on this, and we'll see about timing and all that, and other future edits. So we will leave that at this point. Okay, let's see here. I think just to not necessarily show up again on the PowerPoint, risking changing over again, but we are at the conclusion and wrap up section. Mike, do you have any sort of closing remarks before we sort of dive into asking anyone if they have any closing remarks?
I just want to say thank you. This has been a long road for everybody. I know that, and y'all have been there every step of the way. You have inputted and given your heart and your thoughts, and your shared, how this has impacted you and impacts the community. It's really been an amazing thing. We are closing in. We've got some drafts that we're working up that we expect to get out to you in the next 10 to 14 days, 10 to 20 days. So we're seeing it, and that'll be really the road to the final plan. That is when the work really starts, in sense of actually getting it on the ground. That's really exciting for us to begin to have that framework to start moving forward. So I really wanted to say thank you. We still got a lot to do. This has been fantastic. We're kind of in this home stretch. The commission is not meeting in July, so we anticipate that we will be asking for final approval of the plan, targeting somewhere around August, which means we'll have some of the final documents in June, July time period, which then we back that up to, y'all see in the final version, the draft and the final version, and the public getting their input as well, the commission going to the commission with a work session so that they get to see it before we go out to the public. So that's kind of this process, and wow, this is great. So thank you very much.
Great acknowledgement, Mike. Appreciate that, those words. Any other sort of things that are for the good of the order, if you will? And remember Mike's email, mike.wharton@accgov.com.
So Michael's asking when we'll see the final draft. You will see a draft in the next 14 to 20 days, somewhere right in that time frame. We're hoping that's going to be pretty close to a pretty good draft. Then you'll give feedback, and then from there we will create the final draft, or the final draft before we go to present to the commission in a work session. And then that, depending on, and then we'll go out to the public for feedback, and depending on what we hear from the commission and from the public, that's when the actual final draft will be, is after that point. But you will see I guess the final working draft, or hopefully the completed working draft, is probably the way. But you'll get to see that that interim step, and then we'll finalize that as a completed working draft. But you'll get it, the next one you see is going to be in the format, and hopefully have it dressed out, and hopefully we didn't miss anything. So that's where you're going to give us that feedback, is what did we miss, what do we need to punch it up, what did we capture that might not be quite as accurate, so that we're there.
It'll have graphics, some of the things associated with it. It won't be in its final graphic layout, but it will have all of the content associated with it.
And so I guess I missed, was it May work session or June work session?
Work session is probably going to be May at this point.
And looking for everyone's support in that, obviously, and as many voices as can be carried to all the reviews, in taking your time to do that. Again, a lot more asking of your time, but it is appreciated.
All right.
If there's nothing else, we will close it out. Mike, you got anything? Any other final words?
I hope everybody has a great rest of the day.
Thank you all for your time and attention today.
Thanks, everybody.
Great feedback. Thank you.
Thank you.